Hi, everyone. This is Catherine Michelle, and we're here with Greg Fernandez Jr. and Sophia, and we are going to be giving you just a brief update on some information Sophia has brought forward, and it's stuff I just read today, and just want to kind of get you guys in the loop of what it is we're going to cover. We would cover tonight. They're ready. I am not. I just didn't have time to go over all of it. However, this information is vital, I believe, to the case, and it has to do with the phone records and the financial records of David and Camille Crowley. So, Sophia, could you please tell us what it is that you found?
Well, it was several things. I noticed it about a year ago, right after my hand surgery, and I was just sitting on the couch looking over files and everything. And let's go back into these files here. Some of the things that I noticed was that David stopped making phone calls in November. That he doesn't make any more phone calls or any more text messages. And I found that very odd because it wasn't lining up with what they were saying in the police report or what the friends were saying. And
can you tell us what
think.
Can you tell us what phone number that was?
It was to Midas.
But do you know? But I mean, which phone record? Like, what was David's phone number? Do you remember?
Let me go back here.
So I think that'll be really important because we have documents. We have documents on 4 phone numbers that are tied to David and Camille.
Let's see here.
And another thing that I'm going to look up here is also when did, and maybe either of you might know this too, when did Camille's father cut off their plan? Was it in October or November? I think that's why they have so many phones too.
I believe it was in October.
I think you're right on that.
And I need to go back and open these records up. Catherine, do you have anything open on your computer?
Yeah, I'm looking at the spreadsheets you created, and what is it that you wanted me to look at?
Actually, it was a member called Caleb. His name was Caleb, and he created these spreadsheets.
Oh, okay. Well, he did a fantastic job.
Right? He did an amazing job.
Yeah, I love them. They're great.
It's a great, quick guide.
Now, we probably haven't spread out there as much as we should, I think. I don't know how many people have actually seen this.
Yeah, when Sophia sent it to me today, it was like the first time I'd seen it in this format, and I'm like, this is so much easier to read, and it's right in your face that communication stopped with both of them way before any issues supposedly arose with them. You know, it doesn't coincide with the last time anybody said they talked to them, or it doesn't coincide with the timeline of David writing that email to Jason Allen. Just nothing. The phone records don't jive with the rest of everything else.
And Camille had her last 2 phone calls were to Wells Fargo, and it was that day that the payment bounced for the mortgage. And her phone calls, I believe, were to the automated system because they were after hours. And she possibly could have been transferring money, only because they were after hours.
Maybe checking her balance?
That too, yeah.
Yeah, making sure that the payment posted.
That's what I was thinking. Good Lord.
But this is where it got confusing for me, because there are 4 different phone numbers, and I do believe at least one of those there's phone records up until January.
Well, they're showing calls coming in to these phones, but they were not answered. When you look at the duration of the call, it is 0 seconds, 0 seconds. So a lot of calls are still coming in to both sets of phones that David and Kamel had, but there was no response from the other side.
Right.
And one phone he did have forwarded to his other phone.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I have way too many files on this.
So I'm looking at page 42 of the 94 pages, and this is where it does show that that David or Kamel's dad did cut off this one particular phone in October.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish it would say the number. That I think.
So if that's the case, then this spreadsheet and these phone records that we're looking at for December were on the phone that they had active. So the calls, when they stop communication, David stops communication in November, Kamel stops communication in December. So from that point on, these would be the only two phones that were working. And so according to these documents that are recorded and proof of their activity, there is zero activity from David starting from November 18th. Nothing. And when you look at his phone records before, he was quite active.
And he did call Chris Peck on the 18th also. Mm-hmm. That phone number for David is 612-999-4890.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's...
He called Midas on the 26th of November. That was his very last phone call.
What is Midas? Is that the gold?
I'm not exactly sure. I took it to Midas Auto.
I'd look into the gold. Midas is tied with Alex Jones. He used to be a sponsor for Alex Jones. Look that
That's
up.
a very good thought.
Yeah, and when I'm looking at this, though, when I saw that said call to Midas, we have no idea if David made that call or if someone else made that call. Because when his last call is on the 18th, and his mom then calls him 6 times on the 20th, a text from Rick on the 20th, 18 calls from Kate on the 21st, and a text from Dan Crowley on the 22nd, 2 calls from Kate on the 22nd, and then now all of a sudden there's a call to Midas on the 26th. Now his mom had been trying to reach him and Kamel. When you look at both of their phone records, Kate was calling them both all hours of the day and night, up to 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, without any response.
Yeah.
From either of them. And this is totally eye-opening. And this is why we want you, the listeners, to be prepared. We're going to do a really in-depth show on this. And Sophia, could you tell us what led you down this path again? Could you complete that story and tell us how you ended up zeroing in on this information?
Oh, there's just so many things. When you look at the police reports, and I was looking at that, and I was checking his phone records, and things just weren't adding up. Because, for instance, you hear the brother say, well, I texted him in December. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go back and I'm going to check the records to see if this happened. And December comes. I don't see anything from Dan Jr. in December.
No. Mm-mm.
At all. And I see 2 from Danny August Mason. I see something from Kate Crowley. And the other very interesting thing is no family calls him, either of them, at Christmas time.
Right. Nor on Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, holidays. Did it not mean anything for this family?
Yeah, when it says no calls placed or received for either person, David or Kamel, that was a huge red flag for me.
No, and that's both of their phones that they had active at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And, I mean, we could play devil's advocate and say that stuff was done through Messenger. But it's not in the police reports either. And they made sure to show text messages from family or from, well, I mean, like for Camille, they showed all these message threads to her friend or to Allison.
Mm-hmm.
But they show nothing for Thanksgiving. They show nothing for Christmas or Christmas Day. Why isn't that in the police report? Wouldn't that be proof? Or how about actual proof, written form, that he actually contacted Chris Peck in December? Where's that text message? Why isn't there a screenshot added to the police report?
Right, because that was supposed to be the big where he supposedly went and bought weed, correct? And it was supposed to be done through a text message, but yet there's no proof of that. And not even on these phone records, you know, he calls him in November or texts him in November, or no, a call to Chris Peck 3 seconds. So that's, you know, what, you phone rings and they hangs up. It's like, really?
So that would be another thing to try to get, would be the exchange between David and Chris Peck, right? Because they got it from somewhere.
Yeah, because it shows Chris texted David on the 12th of November, and then David makes a 3-second phone call on the 18th of November. And then there's nothing until the 26th where it says a call to Midas, but we have no idea who made that call, because in between, his mom had been trying to reach him a lot.
Well, that's why
6 calls, and no response. Yeah.
Well, that's why I wonder if there is another phone after this one that David ended this phone service in November, because the police, you know, they say that going through David's phone record that they had that they, you know, that's where they learned about Chris Peck. So there's got to be something in there.
Warrant,
well, then it would mean that he
only
had 3 phone numbers. Yeah. And all the records only show 2, correct?
No, he has 4. There's 4 numbers total.
No, 2 for Kamel, 2 for David, gotcha. Not 4 for each, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that's what the search warrants show.
Yes. Yeah.
And if there's another phone out there, they did not obtain those records legally because it's not in the search warrant. I could be wrong, but...
So in all 4 of the phone records that we have 4 PDFs. In all 4 of those, there's no call made on, what date is this? On December 19th, 2014 at 7:22 a.m. to Chris Peck from David Crowley?
No.
We have the actual phone number here. Well, I'm going to look this up. This is one of the reason when I first got these 94 pages, I personally redacted people's phone numbers and where people lived. And now it's coming back to haunt me because now I got to look at the unredacted ones.
I believe that the number that you are seeing is Chris Peck's phone number.
Oh, okay. So where it says was given some information that a text message was sent from David Crowley's phone to a phone number of, okay, so that's just Chris Peck's number, not, that should help too, though, I guess. And this is weird, now rereading it on page 28 of the 94 pages, this is written by Tommy Booth. On 1/19/2015, Detective Shane Klokonis had given me some information that a text message was sent from David Crowley's phone to a phone number of which belonged to Chris Peck. So this isn't even saying that they looked at a phone record So this Detective Shane Klaukonis should be the one who obtained the phone records, and what he's telling Detective Tommy Booth on 119 should have been based on the phone records, unless it's based on some hearsay, which is possible too. Maybe an informant trying to throw Chris Peck under the bus.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of this stuff is just, it's like it's falling into place now, when looking at these phone records and talking to all the professionals that all of us have spoken with, to me it's like, and I could be way off base, doesn't mean I'm telling the truth, or I'm not lying on purpose. I could be wrong, or I could be mistaken. But this, from the moment you look at the scene, it seems staged. But now with all of this, it was not only staged, but it was pre-planned. And, I'm just like, wow, it's mind-boggling.
It is. And then you hear people say, well, the proof is in the police reports. The proof of his guilt is in the police reports, but it's not. It absolutely is not. And if there was proof of this transaction between Chris Peck and David, they would have included it.
Well, yeah,
not unless they're forced to, right? Not unless we force them to.
Well, no, because if they're listing all of the calls, when they're getting the information, when they put in the search warrant and they requested the documents from the phone company isn't going to sit there and go, oh, wait, let's hold that one out. Because, on the 13th of November, it shows that David texted Kamel.
Right.
It shows that, and it shows that David's getting text, but it does not show that David ever sent a text or a call to Chris Peck in December at all. So that thing about him doing that and they picked up the weed on the 19th or whatever, it's just at this point, according to the information they sent, yes, it's a story, it's a lie, it's fabricated, which just goes like, wow. Where are the lies going to stop in this case? Oh.
And then the other thing that really, really gets to me is in the documentary, David's father states that David was struggling for money. And this is absolutely not true. You look at his financial records, he had money. Kamel was not holding that family up. David had money of his own.
Yes.
And that is another lie that is being put out there by this documentary, and the family is supporting it.
And that's frustrating because, when you're looking at his financials and he has a 6-figure credit limit, you can't have that if you don't have money. And the fact, I think we were talking about this earlier too, the family's obviously very well off. I know very wealthy people myself, and it is a yearly thing, or as often as they need to, they gift family members the legal amount, which I believe at that time was probably the $14,000, which is why his dad wrote him that check, because you can do that at one time, gift somebody. It's either one time or that amount within a year. I can't remember. But then it's a gift. It's tax deductible for the giver, but not taxed and by the receiver. So this is something that had been going on for a long time. And $14,000, it's not a drop in the bucket. I mean, maybe for people who are really rich, but if they were struggling like they're trying to convince us they were, $14,000 would have meant the difference between keeping their home and losing it. So they weren't poor by any stretch of the imagination. And looking at all of their mortgage payments, other than the goof up when the money didn't hit the bank in time, but even then they were able to fix that right away. And so bills were always paid. Credit cards were often paid in advance. There was a credit on the statement because another purchase would be coming in, so they were trying to offset what was going to be charged. These were not people who were struggling.
And let me be clear, his minimum payment could have been maybe $50, $75. He was paying $2,000, $3,000 sometimes for a minimum payment. And when it was only supposed to be $50 to $75.
Right.
So this really, really is an eye-opener when you look or when you think about the whole lie of them struggling financially.
Yeah, it totally
It's
blows that
true.
completely out of the water. Yeah, it's not true in the slightest, And I'm telling you, when I'm still kind of like overwhelmed by all the stuff you sent and reading this and looking at it. It takes a while to sink in, and I'm just like going, wow, there is zero proof. And the more that they've given us, to me, and the way I'm viewing it, the more it appears to me that they were totally set up. This was an ongoing event for quite some time. This was not a snap or spur of the moment murder. This was planned out and done in stages.
Could this have started with the 2012 trailer? Because that always felt like there's lots of red flags back in 2012. 2012 was a crazy year, and I wondered if David was set up, could have started around, the trailer came out in 2012, so earlier than that. But I think it might have been focused, one of the theories, right, is that it was focused around that time. Could it have came later? Sure, but we're all talking about the same people who were part of that script, so.
Yeah, and it just makes so much sense that, those who were saying that David was pulling away from them, I think he found something out about them. I think he discovered whatever that truth may be, and we may never know, but it cost him his life. Yeah, it cost him his life. It cost his family their life. And, he found something. And this was like I said, it feels like it was a long time planned because it was so overdone and not done correctly, that this was just not something you could sit down and go, okay, wait, now you go do that. Wait, I'm going to go do this. We have 2 hours to set this scene.
This also could have started when David was in the service, too. Could have been some payback for something there.
The murderers could have done it for almost any reason. The scene looks like they initially set it up as a hate crime and then went back and overdid it with that bullet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think they were to take the focus, you're right, and make it like a hate crime by writing on the wall, but obviously they were too stupid to realize that, true killings are not. I have never, and I've read up on a lot, and I've talked to a lot of people from that country who've been over there, and not once has anybody ever seen, or have I seen, when an honor killing was done, that they ever wrote in that person's blood on the wall. That was such a faux pas on their part, it wasn't even funny. I'm like, wow, to me, that's like Hollywood staging, a wannabe actor, a wannabe director. So here, let's do this because everybody will think that. And right away, it's like, no, you just gave yourself up.
Well, they're still giving themselves up.
Yeah, I agree. So.
And it's just not there. The proof is not there of guilt at all. All the excuses that they have given can be debunked by these records.
Yeah.
And just like, and I know I keep harping on this, the alcohol. If David was driven to a murder-suicide because of alcohol, and if there was alcohol in that house, the police would have photographed it.
Yes.
Yeah, that would have fit their script, for sure.
Exactly. And it's just not there. There's no photographs of that whatsoever. There's not even a photograph of alcohol sitting around. There's no bottles, no beer cans, nothing.
Yeah, and most people I know who drink, they'll have a 12-pack or something in their garage, as well as having some in the fridge, but they always have a stash in the garage. And you see his whole garage, and I see no, like you said, no evidence of alcohol at all. Nothing.
it's just not there. And so that's just another fabricated lie.
And it was like they had to keep changing their stories. The stories kept changing. I think it's because a lot of people kept asking questions, kept asking real questions. And as those real questions came up, they had to pivot. And you don't have to pivot if you're telling the truth. The truth is the truth. And I think that's what raised a lot of eyebrows, and I think that's why there's so many people still so invested, whether privately or publicly. A lot of people are still invested into this case, and it's getting bigger. And a lot of people, especially either military, whether they're current, past, present, or future, seems to hit them a little hard. Seems to hit them really hard, because that could be them.
Because, yeah, and the movie is implying that David snapped because of military service. And that seems to insult all of us veterans.
Yes.
It should. It definitely should insult you all, because it's
there's no proof that there was PTSD either.
Right.
He wasn't medically discharged from the military. It would say right there on his DD-214.
Mm-hmm.
I used to type these up when I was in the military. It's not there. Mine says service-connected. But...
And we do know he was receiving a small disability from the VA, but he was also in a vehicle that was hit by an IED. And so, he was injured when the bomb went off in the vehicle they were in. But that had nothing to do with suffering PTSD to the extent that he had to go seek counseling. And the military never even said, hey, I think he has issues. Because if someone's having issues, the military has no problem saying, okay, they need to go talk to a psychiatrist. But that was never the case with any of the records I've seen on David. And again, the disability pay was associated with his injury. And it wasn't a very big injury, because you could see him walking and stuff like that, but he still got, some disability. And it did not affect his ability to do his day life, and let alone write that script. I mean, that takes a lot of mental focus. And he was able to do that nonstop and work for weeks at a time. And someone with PTSD couldn't do that. Right.
People would have noticed.
Yeah.
He was out in what, 2009 or something? I forget. Yeah, 2009. It's like 4 years. So no.
It really could have been about anything, and he was getting, I think it was $400 and something. I'm just trying to remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, it wasn't very much.
That's a very low percent. I'm thinking maybe 20 or 30 at the most. And he had a child, and he was married, so I'm thinking possibly 20%. And so I receive 100%, and my children are 18 and above. So I know that.
Yeah, see, you know about it. You know how it works.
Mhm. And it's he really could have been raking in a lot more if it was severe PTSD, especially if it was severe enough to cause him to snap.
Right.
So, plus, it's not written anywhere in the police reports that he had PTSD.
Yeah. And I'm sure that you, being in the military, you personally have seen and know what it looks like when someone is suffering from a bout of PTSD. Now, when we were in Fort Bragg, and my husband at the time was stationed over there, and that was when a plane crashed on the tarmac and it hit a C-5, and there were a bunch of soldiers that were burned. Some of them died, some of them were severely burned, and these guys are coming in, and as they're coming into the ER, I am telling you, when someone suffers that something that is truly PTSD, you see it. they don't function in the same way as someone without PTSD. I mean, there is a huge cognizant difference. There's, and these guys would just sit there and just stare at you, and they wouldn't even talk. And some of them did okay. Others, they never spoke a word after that accident. But then you look at David, and not only is he writing a script, but he's doing trailers. He's making film. He's going out and he's promoting. He's pitching his movie to Hollywood. This guy is more than functioning at a more than competent level, and on an extended period of time.
Just going back 1 second to the PTSD, on page 32, PTSD is actually mentioned, but it's told that David's friend, Mitch Heil, says that David did not have PTSD.
Correct.
He did not believe that David had PTSD or was suffering from PTSD, which makes me think that the police asked him and not that he just volunteered this.
Yeah, and Mitch Heil would know, because wasn't that his longtime friend from grade school?
Yes.
And that they actually went into the service together.
Yeah.
They went to basic training together. Right. Yeah, he's been the only one, I think, that from my view, his story has stayed consistent. Everything that his story to me, I have not seen it waver. I have not seen it. He's always thought David was guilty, but he thinks that it was this whole Gray State project. But he's never one, at least I haven't seen it yet, where where his story has changed to the point where it's just like he's definitely lying. I haven't seen that yet. I see it with a lot of other people, but not him.
Yeah.
I mean, these records, they bring up so many more questions. Just when you think you're going to get answers, you get something else that just brings up 100 more questions. And that's what's so frustrating about this case.
Yeah, and I agree with that. Like when I first saw that today, it's like, that's why I wrote an email. I said, please excuse my French. It was just like, I had to say something because it was like such a shock. And I'm like, how long have you known about this? And you're like, for about a year now. I'm like, oh, we have to tell everybody. This has got to get out there. The phone records and everything don't match with the official's narrative.
And I've been saying something this whole time. It's just nobody really picks up on it, or it just doesn't translate right when you're writing it down on the internet. And so thank you, Catherine.
No, you're welcome. It's like I told you. It's like I've listened to every one of the videos you've done with Greg, and this never came across to me. I never got the gist of it. So when I saw it today, and I'm like, wait, why hasn't this been said? And when you're like, but I have said something, and I'm like, okay, but my brain didn't pick up on it. So, I mean, I think a lot of us just didn't pick up on it. It just went right over our heads. And when you start to realize that David stopped all communication on mid-November, Kamel stops all communication December, and we know those bodies, and I will stand by this until the day I die, those bodies were not in that house for 3 weeks. Those bodies were only dead for maybe up to 10 days at the most. And so where were they? What was going on? Who was controlling their movements? What was happening to this family? And to David? Why wasn't David in communication with Kamel between the time he stops communication and then Kamel stops communication? There's not even any proof that they even called or talked to each other, where before they would make phone calls or text each other. But then nothing. It all stops.
Another thing about the documentary, and I clearly remember this, is they're talking about David constantly calling Kamel's phone number. But
and we know that's a lie.
And you don't see it.
Yeah.
You just do not see it.
It's a flat-out lie. Yeah.
Mhm.
So what in that documentary was true? Nothing that I could find so far. Okay,
And
that's just me being
after
snarky,
seeing all this, I even asked Greg flat out. I was like, what do we know about David and Kamel that hasn't been told in the documentary? What do we know about them? And you have to think about it. It's like everything that we know about him has been from the documentary or from the family. But you go back to the records, and anything that has been stated, whether it was the documentary or through family interviews, the majority of it is disinformation. Mm-hmm. It can be debunked by the facts, and the facts are the police records. Whether it is information that they got from the phone companies, for instance, the phone records, or the credit report, or, I know a lot of people really don't realize this, but there was a mortgage company that was in contact with David, and it was in Ocean View, I believe, and he received 2 credit checks. I believe either it was in November or December, and then again in January, after they supposedly passed away. And with that credit report, I would hazard a guess that they probably would have been approved through this mortgage company. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's planning for the future.
Right. And a big future that includes moving states. You know, that is not somebody who's going to go off the deep end and just snap all of a sudden and be so despondent.
Mm-hmm. And it just infuriates me that they expected us to take this documentary as gospel and to believe everything in it and stop asking questions. They made a documentary on these people's lives, and now we are being told to stop asking questions, mm-hmm. that it's not our business. You just lied about these people over and over, and now you're asking us to stop asking questions? It doesn't work that way.
No, it doesn't.
You guys put everything out publicly.
Yeah, and it's like they're mad because we're asking questions, because this is like the ones who actually killed this family. It's like they were so inept and so stupid to make so many ridiculous mistakes. And it's the same thing with the documentary. They think that because they pull the wool over their own eyes, they think everybody else is as stupid as they are, and they're going to believe it. And the vast majority of people who watch that documentary are going, oh, wait a second, there's something really wrong. You guys didn't do this right.
And it doesn't add up. Their reactions don't add up. Mm-mm. And I mean, like 1 or 2, you could probably think, oh, they're still grieving. It's very possible that they took medication, and that's why they're a little off. But it's everybody.
Right.
Well, I think one of the biggest things that is never mentioned in that the whole documentary, one of the biggest things that is never mentioned is that Kamel's side of the family pulled out of the documentary, did not want to be part of it. So they knew that this documentary was crap even before it ever aired.
Yeah. And they're not about to say, like you said, they're not about to tell anybody that.
No.
You know, they just, bypass it and hope nobody asks the questions. But it's
But why isn't Kamel's family telling, they need to really step it up. They really need to step it up because they know what's up. They got to know what's up.
Yep. And it's like I was saying before, it comes across to me that where the families are concerned, it's like the Stockholm syndrome. They're best friends with people who may or may not have had a part in this, or know somebody, or may not know somebody who had a part in this. And because you can't accept that type of brutality, it's just like, kidnap victims. They, will protect the person who's harmed them. And in this case, it's like they're protecting everybody who has said some pretty horrible things about their family.
I mean, can you imagine joking about your friend's murder?
No.
And, I mean, just some of the messages that were posted that either Mason Hendricks had said or, other people connected to this case have said, and it's very possible that they could have been sarcastic, but the low, just the tackiness of it, and talking about the blood and writing on the wall, and it's horrible. How could you joke about stuff like that? These are your friends.
Yeah.
That you supposedly care so much about. And you're sitting there making jokes about it. And it's very crass.
Yeah, and I don't find it remotely funny at all. And I don't even, even if it's sarcastic or even done out of frustration, that would have still been the last thing anybody would have joked about.
Mm-hmm.
And this was which Mason? Mason Hendricks?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, that's the guy who told me that he wanted to become a cop. He had a degree in law enforcement. He wanted to work with the troubled youth. We found out that the cops are all, there's too many reasons why he couldn't do that. And that's the path of an informant. Now, I'm not accusing Mason Hendricks of being one, but, he was on the right path to be set up to be compromised, to actually be one. And if he really wanted to work with troubled youth, then he should have put more time into this case and investigated why a 5-year-old was killed. If he really cares about the troubled youth, there's your troubled youth. The troubled youth that aren't here now. David was a troubled youth. They all had, their own things going on. But if you really care, then you would want to know what the truth is. You would not give up. You'd read the documents. He didn't read them all. You'd look at everything that you possibly could. You can't tell me that you know more than me if you haven't read everything that I've read, and it's all public stuff.
Right. And that's so frustrating when they do that. They're like going, oh, you guys just don't know. And you're like, yeah, we're the ones who are reading everything.
And then in the documentary, they painted Camille as like a battered wife.
Yeah.
But there's absolutely no proof of that. And as I said, David is not calling her phone nonstop, obsessively like they stated. And if Camille acted that way, if she did at work where she supposedly ducked out through the back, could there have been a different reason? Or if it even happened? You take a lot of things and just the different things that were said in the documentary, and you have to just throw it out after you read the proof and all the records, because it's just not true. It was propaganda.
Can you picture if they would have been able to make it seem like Camille was involved in some type of pact to kill her kid? I think even less people would think that David Crowley was guilty. That's where they were going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and none of that makes sense at all. I mean, not only does the crime scene not support that theory, but who they are as parents and how much they love that little girl, no. That was just, they were grasping for straws, throwing out a million different of their ideas, hoping somebody would latch on to something.
Right.
Well,
and a few
people did latch on to it.
They did, I'm sure. The problem they have with this whole hate crime thing is, they've basically muddied those waters now, because it's not a hate crime, but it's in those stats. David did not, there's no proof that David was abusive to his wife, but he's in those stats too. he's in these stats that he should not be of. And at some point, somebody has to question, well, if he's in them, how do we know that the other stats are true? And there are real hate crimes, and there are real people that do beat up on their spouses and their kids and do horrible things. And so when we're talking about that, it's so serious that you can't just jump to that conclusion because you want to, because that puts you back into your safe zone. Because all you're doing is just lying to yourself and then lying to everybody else.
Yeah, and when they were bringing up the old David was abusive, and when I found out he was on that list, for domestic violence, I've said this before. I have been a victim of domestic violence. I know what those people are like. He doesn't fit any of the criteria, and the fact that you have somebody who's innocent and you're putting them on a list, making them out to be the villain when the real perpetrators are out walking free, I have a big problem with that. Huge problem with that.
Yeah. And you're not the only one to say that, Catherine. That last conference call that you all had, the really long one, there was another domestic violence survivor who came on and said the same exact thing. She said, I'm a survivor, and I know what an abuser looks like, and David didn't come off as that.
Yeah. I mean, I knew right away that was not true when I saw how he responded, and I've said this a million times, how David responded when the person that was with Eric Sayward, the guy behind the camera, going, oh, where's your daughter? I want to meet your daughter. And David positions himself. He blocks that guy's view of his family. And he's like, no, they're not feeling safe right now. And I'm like, I'm surprised David didn't deck the guy, to be honest with you, because that was just so creepy and uncalled for. And usually with abusers, they don't care. They don't want to protect their family. It's not about that. I mean, they're highly aggressive and volatile, and there's nothing I've seen about David in any respect. And not to say he never got angry, because that's crazy, but, just his whole demeanor is not one of someone who has that history of domestic violence.
And I need to come out on the record for this. For those going around and saying that there's a journal out there with proof of this, then if that's what you're going by as your proof, you guys need to show it.
Yep.
We are giving evidence, as you guys have demanded so many times. We're giving you proof that David is innocent. We're giving you proof and debunking your lies. Now, if you're claiming that there is a journal out there stating that David was an abuser, you guys need to prove that. You need to show it. And it has to be written in his handwriting. I'm not going to take this computer-generated day one stuff, because that can be edited. You can go back at any time and write whatever you want. I know, because I downloaded that app and tested that theory.
Yeah, I would also add that anybody that says that there is any other journal out there, that the cops are saying that there is not.
Okay, see, and that's good to know too. So then the police right there are saying that they're lying.
Yep.
The police would know.
We have that in writing.
Yeah. So we can just toss that out the window right now. Whoever's saying that there's a journal, they're lying, because the police have flat out said that's not true.
And now the question is, why are they lying?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they put a spotlight on themselves. They're not victims. They're inserting themselves and actually making themselves suspicious persons involved in this case. Whether it's after the fact, it's fine. We can all say it's after. But whatever. They're still inserting themselves, and they shouldn't.
Yeah, all seriousness. If they don't want the spotlight on them, then stay out of it.
Yeah.
Don't be adding to this info.
Move stage right.
Yes. Oh, man.
You can't sit there and give disinfo and taunt people who are actually looking into this case and then play the victim. You cannot have it both ways. It
Right.
doesn't work that way.
Yep,
right.
I agree. I agree.
Okay, anything else before we wrap up here and
No, I just
come back for a part 2?
Yeah, we'll come back for a part 2 for sure when I have more time to be better prepared and stuff, but this was just so last minute, and thank you guys for actually jumping on board and joining in and getting this out there. But I just think it's something that everybody should be prepared for and know, because this is so important, and I can't believe that the police and nobody else has put this together. So thank you, Sophia, for getting this, for finding this, and for bringing it to our attention.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
we've
been talking about this for doing this show for a while, so I'm glad we finally got the time to. But go ahead, Sophia.
Well, it wasn't just me. I mean, there were other people who pointed this out to me also, and so.
Yeah, who's the guy that put the?
Kudos
that's
to all
Caleb.
of you.
I believe it was Caleb Sanders.
Okay.
That put the phone records together. And then there was Christy, who I've done a lot of long late-night chats with, going over these records and rehashing this whole case over and over and over. And Lee, so it wasn't just me. It was other people included.
Kudos to everybody, because this is amazing.
Absolutely.
Well,
and that's what it
Catherine.
takes. That's why it's so important to get so many eyes, so many people on this case as possible, because it can't just be 1 or 2 or 3 people. We need everybody to help out as much as you can and do whatever you can.
I agree.
Well, thank you, Greg. And I want to tell everybody, go out there, read the records. Don't take everything from that documentary as face value, or things that people connected to this case have to say at face value. You go out there and you research it yourself. You'll see the answers. You'll see the disinfo. So please research it. Look, it's there.
Amen.
And thank you, Greg and Catherine. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you.
All right, good peeps. Until we meet again.
Until then, you guys have a good night.
All right, you too.
Good night.
Okay.